Welcome everybody to our quarterly investor call. These calls are really meant to help inform you, our supporters, our participants of the work that we at Second Harvest are doing here. It's just to give you a little bit more of an insider view to the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. So today we have a great panel discussion looking at our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging journey here at the food bank. I'm glad you can all join us. I'd like to introduce our panel to you. Our moderator for this conversation is, well, apparently practically all of you. It's Sierra Top, who joined Second Harvest in April of 2020 as our donor relations manager. Previous to joining Second Harvest, she was an executive fellow with UC Santa Cruz's Everett program and a project manager and research associate at the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Sierra joined Second Harvest just at the start of the pandemic and was able to bring her skills and experience forward to help us continue to engage our donors and supporters with up-to-date information. Sierra has been an active staff member, on our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Task Force. Next, we have Andrea Carlos-Willy. Andrea's personal and professional life has been dedicated to facilitating positive change in health education domains that support fragile populations and future generations. Her largely nonprofit work experience has spanned the fields of human rights, bioethics, education, and healthcare. She's currently the district grant writer for the Pajaro Valley Unified School District. She serves not only on the Second Harvest Board, but also on both the MAIA Foundation and CASA of Santa Cruz County boards. Andrea is one of the board leaders of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Task Force. Mary Casey is our other panelist. She is our SHRM accredited HR director and has worked at the food bank for the past 6 years. Her career has been almost exclusively in the nonprofit sector, both at work and at home as a volunteer and foster family. Mary's primary focus has been on issues affecting children. Mary is our HR director and one of the staff leaders for our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Task Force. So that's our panel tonight. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. I think I mentioned this conversation is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent out, but that might take us a little bit longer than normal. We're doing some staff transitions right now. So we'll have this out in the next week or two for you. But it's being recorded, and if you would like to ask any questions, please feel free to type them into the comments section. We'll have some time at the end to respond to those questions. Like I said, we'll make this recording available, and I'm really excited to start things off. So Sierra, do you want to take us away?
All right, so thank you, Suzanne, for the introduction. I'm really excited to share all the work we've been doing with our DEIB group. And yeah, I will be guiding us through some questions with Mary and Andrea, and then we'll have some time at the end, and you can ask stuff in the chat as we go. Okay, so Mary, let's have you start with what is DEIB?
Hello, everyone. Well, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, DEIB is an acronym that stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. You might have seen this kind of work referred to as DEI, but we felt that that last bit, that B for belonging, was really important to add. I'm sure we all appreciate and understand the importance of prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but without an organizational culture that ensures staff really feel that they belong, we felt that the work really fell short. So creating a sense of belonging for everyone, our staff, our volunteers, our participants, the whole community that interacts with and utilizes the food bank, that's really our end goal, the result we are hoping to achieve through our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as many of you know, this organization was founded in 1972 and opened its doors to the community as only the second food bank in the entire country. You might not know that we began as part of the Black Panthers Breakfast for Kids program that launched in 1969. The Breakfast for Kids program, which was one of the core of the Panthers community organizing works, existed around the country in places like Oakland and Newark and here in Santa Cruz. So our CEO, Willie, here likes to say that community organizing around food for social change is really deep in our DNA. We hold social justice dear to our hearts and really core to who we are as an organization. And as we approach our 50th anniversary, this work is really a chance to examine our strengths and our areas of opportunity to ensure that we're staying true to those foundational beliefs and core values.
Great, thank you. So Andrea, can you expand a little bit on why now and this moment that we're choosing to do this work? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Sierra, and hello to the Second Harvest Food Bank community and our guests this evening. It's such an honor to participate in this investor call. So share a little bit more information with you about the perspectives of the incredible work happening at Second Harvest with and in service of our community. As you know, the events of 2020 and 2021 really resulted in a deep call to action around the issues of physical and mental health disparities, systemic racism, and a threat to our democracy. And as has been the case since its inception, Second Harvest has responded bravely and boldly to crisis like this, leaned in to listen, understand, and address community needs. And that is happening today. So our work in this area has been further strengthened and informed by umbrella organizations, which include Feeding America, a network of 200 food banks across the nation, and the California Association of Food Banks, a network of 41 food banks, both of whom are leading efforts to pursue root cause policy work at local, federal, and state levels and examining equity. These networks are building a process for shared analysis and understanding of the effects of systemic change solutions that advance racial, gender, and economic justice. It's also noteworthy that Second Harvest helped found and provide leadership for both these umbrella organizations in their infancy. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work is also a critical priority for nonprofits across all sectors in our nation at this historic moment as well. In fact, BoardSource, the nation's leading nonprofit board policy and practice association, is calling upon boards to assess themselves and drive significant and meaningful change in the area of equity.
Great. So back to you, Mary. Can you share a little bit about what we're doing currently right now to address these concerns?
Absolutely. So prior to 2020, we already had what was, in hindsight, a modest structure of all staff trainings and workshops that we put on annually. But as Andrea discussed, the results of 2020 and the national soul searching that followed the death of George Floyd, among many others, was really a call to action. And it was immediately clear to everyone that what we were doing was not enough. So we began by creating a working group which was comprised of both staff and staff from every department of the food bank, as well as board members. And that working group was tasked with creating goals so that we could really be clear about what kind of project, what kind of journey we wanted to see the food bank move towards. And then we launched a nationwide search for an organization to help guide us on that journey. We ended up selecting an organization called Healing Equity United, and they've worked with organizations across the country, including local organizations like CASA. Fiona and Jess, our consultants from HEU, began by doing some really exhaustive stakeholder engagement, deep dive surveys of all of our staff and all of our board members. And I do mean exhaustive. Staff and trustees were asked a total of 165 questions as part of this work. And from that huge treasure trove of data, HEU created a 32-page report, which we shared out in its entirety to all of our staff and all of our trustees. And it summarized the responses and where they saw our strengths and where they saw our areas of opportunity. And then after that report came out, we gathered all of our staff and board together in a series of workshops to sort of go through the results and determine our top priorities, trying to co-create next steps so that we could really focus on making progress on what we saw as the top items. We ended up selecting 6 priorities, which are in the process of being incorporated into our strategic plan, more on that strategic plan later. But that's really to ensure that we have a clear plan of action to move the needle on those 6 goals. And next on our agenda, we're launching a series of monthly workshops with HEU. We have a training on implicit bias scheduled in October, and in November, one called We're Woke, Now What?, which I'm sure will generate really rich conversation, and we're looking forward to.
Okay, so Andrea, Mary mentioned the survey that Healing Equity United did with all of us. I was hoping you could expand on that a little more and what we're doing to address these issues.
Yeah, thank you, Sierra, and thank you, Mary. It was such a meaningful assessment, both the individual and the overall board assessment that board engaged in. And as Mary alluded to, we came up with 6 priority areas that we'll initially focus on, 3 with staff and 3 with the board. And staff are going to be looking in the area of human resources at things like the structure of HR, right? Ensuring that there's not just diversity, but equity and inclusion and hiring practices in the myriad of policies that HR oversees. And then they're also going to be looking at community engagement and listening. How do we create a process where diverse communities, and our community in particular, can provide regular feedback on how Second Harvest is connected to and working with the community that we seek to serve and our participants? And finally, the third recommendation that staff will first be looking at is around leadership and management. Initially, just acknowledging the power differentials that can show up in the structure of organizations, and explicitly gaining an understanding of how we can better value and include frontline staff as leaders in meetings, on projects, and in the community. The board of directors will be looking at another set of 3 goals. And one will be, again, in the area of leadership and management, where we really look at what is the pathway and career growth for employees within the organization, especially those who are frontline staff. We also will be looking at the power differentials that can show up in the hierarchy, which includes the board. And we'll also be looking to diversify our board as our second goal through amplified recruitment efforts, listening, connecting more deeply with the community and our participants, and hope to set some objectives around what the composition of the board might look like as we move through time and our DEIB journey, we like to call it. And then our third will be to expand the scope of board recruitment so that we don't only value diversity in one area, but to include lived experience and people's identities. And so those are the 6 that we're going to start with, and we know that there are many more and that this is ongoing work.
Okay, so Mary, can you speak a little bit about the work we're doing externally with our partner agencies and our community members?
Yeah, so like Andrea mentioned, a big part of the focus in our strategic plan is ensuring that we are listening more than we are talking. So we want the community's feedback on the services we offer and how we offer them. We want to know what's working for them and where we can improve. We have always had systems in place to capture participant feedback, but we're really launching a series of initiatives to try and ensure we're truly capturing the community's perspective, and where we aren't, coming up with new and creative ways to hear from the county. So for instance, at the moment, our programs team is doing interactive surveys with participants to get their feedback on the food that we're offering and say, do you like this food? Is this the food you want to be receiving? And if not, what do you want to be receiving? And how can we better make sure that we are getting the food that will be used and is needed to your family? We are also working on mapping the gap. Where are there communities that we aren't reaching, and why aren't we reaching those specific communities? What can we do to better tailor our outreach to that community? So really, we're just looking to be better at asking questions and then better at listening to the rich knowledge that exists in our community.
Okay, and then what are some next steps with our strategic plan that you mentioned earlier and our 3-year goals?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the food bank is in the process of finishing what's been a year-long project to create our next strategic plan. And the strategic plan will be formally adopted by the board later this month, and it covers the next 3 fiscal years worth of projects and priorities. So the plan has 4 key pillars, and we've identified diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as one of those 4 pillars. And part of why we think it's so vitally important to have a DEIB strategic plan is that it makes the work accountable. There's metrics, there's reportings, there's specific actions and goals that have been or will be identified and assigned. And again, that's just to ensure that there is transparency and accountability about how we're moving forward with this work. Part of the strategic plan work included looking at the wording of our mission, vision, and values and saying, do these still resonate? So I look forward to sharing some of the highlights of our strategic plan with you in the coming months, but I think you'll find that we've worked very hard to really embed DEIB principles throughout the whole plan and not just in one area. And I fully anticipate that when we craft our next 3-year strategic plan, DEIB will continue to hold the same importance because, like Andrea mentioned, it's a journey. There's no finish line to cross. There is no merit badge that says you have now achieved diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Next. But I'm also really excited about some of the work that we were already doing that is bearing fruit. So we recently got certified as a fair wage employer, meaning that we're part of a national coalition of organizations that have committed to matching the local living wage ordinance. We recognize that to meet our vision of a thriving Santa Cruz County, the people who live here need to make a living wage. And so we've committed to ensuring that a living wage is the very least that we pay. And we are also in the process of getting certified as a second chance employer, meaning that we recognize that who has a criminal record and who doesn't has a lot to do with intersectional issues of race and class. Approximately 70 million people in the US have a criminal record. That's 1/3 of working age US adults. And we want to be part of people improving their lives and the lives of their families and not perpetuating cycles of poverty. So we are in the process of putting together new processes and procedures to reduce barriers to potential employees who may have a criminal record but are looking to change their circumstances for the better, and we want to be part of that.
All right, it's all so exciting. Okay, so Andrea, can you wrap us up with what we need from the community to really make this work?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mary. It is exciting. It's exciting to be part of the transformation of what we know will serve our community best and better moving forward. And the reason Second Harvest has been so successful over so many decades, in part, obviously, Willie, right? But who's been there so long, but also because we've had deep community involvement. You know, the integrity of this organization has always rested on its ability to reach out to a community at a time of need, and for that community to become part of the continued outreach of the organization as well, right? We do that well. The thing that we want to start to focus on is really listening. So all of the transformations that we talked about with the pandemic, with racial inequities, and with the threat to democracy, we're in a transformative time as a nation, as a society, and as a community. And we need to listen. We need to listen and understand how that is bearing out in our community in terms of root causes of hunger and poverty. And the experts are those who are in our community. And so with our equity lens, both as a staff and a board, we will be doing that work and refining that lens so that we are moving forward in the journey and learning forward. We also recognize that part of our community are those who support us, those who invest in us. Some of you are on the call this evening, and we thank you because we recognize that this work is ongoing and is only possible because of donors, funders, and generous partners who will help Second Harvest Food Bank move forward in its equity roadmap and continue to be the high integrity organization in the county that it has always been.
Okay. So that wraps it up for my questions. So Suzanne, I'll pass it over to you. And thank you, Mary and Andrea, for those really thoughtful answers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know that we have a big, meaty, very important topic, and we just scratched the surface of this. This was the here's the down and dirty view of what's going on in Second Harvest. So I didn't see any questions in the chat. If people do have questions, if you wanted to raise your hand, if typing it down wasn't going to work for you, if you wanted to raise your hand, I can call on you for that. If there's no other questions, I don't know if any of there's a couple other trustees who are here, or Willie, if any of you wanted to say anything about the process that we've been going through, or I can just say, hey, thanks so much. This was great. We're looking at other investor call ideas. One that I posed is if you would like to learn more about our strategic plan, let me know in the chat. And then I can give you back 8 minutes of your day. Any questions? Oh, wait, here's one. Susan asks, your values as an intention set the stage for participation, guided investing. Are you considering this? let's see, I'm not quite sure I understand this one. And this is Susan B. Your values as an intention.
And
Oh, values and intentions, sorry, literal reading. Set the stage for participation. Participant guided investing. Are you considering this? Anyone want to take this one? It's an interesting question, and I have not actually thought about that. Rochelle, did you want to step in? Did I see you raising your hand on that one, or is that a no?
no, I was waving to my husband who was walking out the door. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now that looks like a good question for Andrea. Andrea, do you want to try to take a stab at Susan's question?
Yeah, well, I love that idea, right? So it's not necessarily a new idea, but it is not only asking those participants who we serve what they'd like to see in terms of program and involvement in the organization, but of course the decision on how we invest, right, dollars that come to us. And I really like that. I think that can and should be one of the questions as we reach out to listen to our community that we ask. I hope that answers your question, Susan. If not, please, unmic yourself and ask for further clarification.
We got a thank you from her, so maybe that answered it. Another question from Dr. Rodriguez. How will the inclusion of belonging influence the way that you implement your diversity and equity work?
I'm wondering if Josue wants to take a stab at that.
Sure, I can do that. I don't want to take the stage off the panelists. So the belonging piece is very important to all of the work that we do, because the way that we see it is that we can create a space that's diverse. We can create a space that's equitable. And we can create a space that's inclusive. But if all of that gets done and nobody feels like they belong, or they don't feel like this is the right place for them, then we've failed. And that's where the focus of belonging is. It's how do we create the best possible solution for everybody, and how do we create a space where everybody wants to be a part of and everybody's voices are heard. And so that's why we're taking the consideration of our participants, and we're doing something that we've been doing before, but we're doing it more intentionally, and we're listening. We're listening to our participants, and we're wanting to see what they're wanting from us. We want them to be front and center in all of the work that we do, and that's a big part that's reflected in our new mission, our new values, in our strategic plan. Does that answer your question, Dr. Rodriguez?
Excellent. We've been asked if we can share a bit more about how the staff and board are working collaboratively on this work.
Absolutely, I can jump in, and then Andrea, if you want to jump in too. Really, we've tried to make this as collaborative as possible. So like I mentioned, the foundational group that really wrote the request for proposal that we sent out to find the organization, that was comprised of a group that I think was maybe even just half and half board and staff. We really tried to make sure that everyone who was interested was represented there. So it was open to all. We didn't have a max number of participants, which was great. And as we worked through both the results of the survey and our deep dive, like Josue mentioned, into looking at our values and things like that, it's been a cross-functional group of board and staff the whole time. There have really not been parallel tracks as far as the goals that are being set are seen and reviewed by everybody. So we've tried to make it as much as possible integrated, setting aside practical needs for, when board members can meet, when staff members can meet. So there's the logistical fun of it all. But we've really tried to make sure that it was integrated and transparent so that nobody felt like there were priorities being set away and, behind a wall, so to speak. Andrea, I'm sure you have a better answer to that.
No, I'll just build upon what you said, Mary, because it's absolutely right. We work together to do the RFP, the request for proposals, which really allowed the conversation to start genuinely. And then we've moved together, and Willie likens it to a zipper, right? We're trying to, as we take steps, and sometimes staff can step farther than we do and faster than we do because they have more time to invest as employees of the organization. But the board is keeping up, and we're being informed, and we have have learned to be unafraid in asking questions and moving quickly in the interest of doing the work and being authentic. And you know, it's not always easy. And sometimes there are disagreements. You know, when we did stuff like the values clarification work around the strategic plan, that took a long time because we've learned a new vocabulary. We've learned that having conversations about concepts that might be challenging and uncomfortable is okay. And we end up in a place where we're actually stronger and we've deepened the relationship. So I think it's been wonderful, but it does take time and commitment. And that's what I would say, that board members of today are perhaps not board members of several years ago in many organizations where you just showed up to the meeting, chatted with folks, and went back home. You're actually working hard between meetings, having conversations, building relationships, and investing in your organization as much as you can. And then I wanted to say, we skipped one question in the chat from Cesario.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to come back to that because I thought this was a good lead-in to Cesario's question. So Cesario asks, what challenges do you anticipate in diversifying your board, and how will you address those challenges? Which is really great, because as Andrea was saying, it's not just show up to a meeting, be present, and then go away. We're asking a lot of our board members. So who wants to take on that one?
Tricia, do you want me to start, or would you like to start? Tricia is our board president right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have the answers except to just say it's really hard. It's been a priority for many, many years, and we've made some incremental steps, but we're not doing as well as we ought to be. We ought to be reflecting our community, and we're not at this time. Although, you know, we have some really strong diverse candidates in the pipeline, and so I'm hoping that we're going to make that change, and of course we have to just keep it at the forefront. And Andrea, I'd love you to add to that.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I've continued to see, and everyone on this call knows, and that's why you are here tonight, relationships matter. And in a community like ours, and in a county like ours, and especially during this time after you know, so much challenge connecting with people, it is important to go out and build relationships and work alongside people. So whether it is inviting someone to tour at the warehouse so they understand what we're doing, and talking to them, and finding people that have that passion and commitment about understanding root cause, lifting up the voices of those in our community, because they are those with lived experience. And when we want to understand something, it's really important to talk to people who are experiencing it. Much like in my sector where I work now in education, we listen to the voices of students because they are in the classroom. They are the ones we seek to serve. And so when we hear their perspective, our system can improve. And the same is true with Second Harvest. So we want to go out into the community, be with people in different settings, events, and find those people who share our passion to address this and be a community-centric and minded board and organization. But it will take time.
So I know we're at 5:31 right now. We promised to get you out of here at 5, but we have one more really interesting question. If you can, stick around for just a minute, because Dean asks, what are the top 3 gaps or variances that you're working on, and what measurements are you using? And this is a really tactical question that I'm going to lob right at Willie, because he's so good at our tactics on this one.
Oh, thanks, Suzanne, for that. So Dean, as you can imagine, where we're at in our, it's a great question, where we're at in sort of our planning piece is really putting together our strategic frameworks, so our pillars, and now we're, you know, laying out our goals and our strategies. And quite frankly, the next step that we're working on is our tactics, our action plan, and our metrics. And so that's the work that we're really digging our hands in right now. And so, you know, I wish I could give you a more specific answer, but just to say that's front and center work in progress for us. And thanks for that.
One more came in, so I'll keep asking questions as long as y'all are still available to answer them. Cesario does want to know, what processes did we use to develop our DEIB lens?
Do you want me to start, Mary?
Sure, yeah,
And-
go for it. I'll jump into yeah.
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of doing that right now, Cesario. We're going to have a roadmap for the board and staff movement, and one of them is to develop the lens. So we know that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work is a product, if you will, perhaps by a roadmap that sets you on your journey, but then it's also a process, and the lens is a tool that we will use, and it will improve iteratively as we move forward, and it will inform decisions. It will inform questions we ask when we get together. It will inform how we might develop an agenda for a meeting, whether it's a staff or a board meeting. And we're going to be looking at other organizations that have these. We have the good fortune of having a partner organization in Oregon who has a very well-developed lens, and we might try pieces of that to see, are they a fit for us? Do they work with our community? What does our community think of that? Does it help us uncover what we hope it does? So we're learning it, and we're happy to share with others as we move forward. I think that's one of the other wonderful things about the food bank is we don't want to keep good secrets from others who are serving the same community. So it's important to share.
I was going to say the same thing, Andrea, which is that the work that we're doing now is to create that lens. That's part of the workshops we're doing, the continued delving that we're doing. It would be premature to have our lens already, because we're in the process of really developing and saying, where does that need to come from? But there are great examples in the food bank network and elsewhere of people who are on this journey alongside us, and so we feel rich in our resources there. And of course, HEU, who is guiding us along and is helping us produce that as well.
I'm going to throw out a last call for questions. I'm not seeing any additional ones out there. I want to thank you all so much for participating and joining us. These questions were fantastic. We will be looking at our next investor call, so we hope you will be able to join us again. We will have this one as a recording out in probably 1 to 2 weeks. So sorry for the delay. Like I said, we're just doing some staffing changes and really are a little bit short-staffed on this, but we will have this out on our YouTube channel. If you've missed any of our previous investor calls, they are on our YouTube channel. Easiest way to get there, go to thefoodbank.org and scroll down, click on YouTube, and that will take you to our channel. And also, if any of you haven't heard, we are having our Holiday Food and Fun Drive kickoff on November 4th. So I hope you can join us. We'll be at Cabrillo College doing a old-fashioned rally style kickoff this year, just to keep things safe and socially distant. Anything last that I missed? If not, thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Great to see you all. Goodbye. Great
good
to
to
see
Great
you.
to
Lily.
see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Cesario.
Bye, Andrea.
Great.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Really good job.
Thank
Yep.
you. Bye.
Thought it
Bye.
went well. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.